Good morning.
What? Tam will hear my phone ring even though she's not here.
Sorry, didn't mean to just turn it on and start laughing. Good morning, I'm Felicia Marcus, Chair of the Board, and today is Tuesday, February 5th, and it is 9:34 a.m., and the meeting is called to order. With me are, to my left, Board Member Didi Didamo, and to her left, Board Member Sean McGuire, to my right, Board Member Joaquin Esquivel. Ms. Sobeck, please introduce the staff that are assisting today.
Good morning, Chair Marcus. To my right is Chief Counsel Michael Laufer, and to my left, my two Chief Deputies, Jonathan Bishop and Eric Oppenheimer. And we have Janine Townsend, Clerk of the Board, and assisting her is Courtney Tyler.
Thank you. All right. For those of you who aren't familiar, the building's emergency evacuation procedures require that we leave the building if you hear an emergency sounding sound. It's either a real emergency or a drill, which we do need to take just as seriously. So look for the entrance or the exit nearest you, and if you hear that sound, which sounds like a Star Trek red alert pretty much, just go ahead and pick up your stuff and take your friends and proceed out. We use the stairs during an emergency, so if you need assistance, somebody will help you. There's a protected area on every floor. Also, please take a moment to look at your noise-making devices and put them on silent or stun so that they don't disturb anyone or interrupt the proceedings, unless it's incredibly funny because Tam's not here, and that will amuse me. So if it's really funny, you can leave it on. The meeting is being webcast and recorded, so please make sure that you speak close to the microphone so that it gets picked up. We may be able to hear you even though we're in this crazy big room today. But the people on the webcast won't, or the people in the back of the room, and we want to make sure everybody hears everything you have to say. I think that those are the major announcements. And our first item is a presentation of a Superior Accomplishment Award. And Leslie, are you doing the honors?
Ah, there we go. All this fancy stuff. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Marcus and members of the board. I'm Leslie Loudon. I'm the Deputy Director of the Division of Financial Assistance. And I have with me Diane Barkley, our Assistant Deputy Director, and she's the manager of the Underground Storage Tank Cleanup Fund. And we're here today to present a Superior Accomplishment Award to all of the staff of the Underground Storage Tank Cleanup Fund. The award is for a project that they undertook in 2017 to eliminate a rather large backlog that had developed of reimbursement requests. And the entire staff worked on this project. I think this award is rather unique in both the magnitude of the accomplishment that they're being recognized for and in the number of staff that are receiving the award. While we have a number of the staff here in the room, I think most of them actually are watching the presentation over at 801K. So we want to say hi to all of them and recognize them there. So rather than every single staff person being given the award here and taking up quite a bit of time on your agenda, the staff in each section nominated one person to represent them. And so we'll be giving the award recognizing each section to one of the members of the section. But before I get to introducing them, I want to tell you about the project and what the accomplishment was. So the cleanup fund had developed a very large backlog of reimbursement requests over a number of years. And in January 2017, the backlog had reached over 2,000 reimbursements that were pending payment. And our processing time for processing those payments was over 200 days. And we have a statutory deadline to process reimbursements within 60 days. So obviously the 200 days was not acceptable to our claimants and our stakeholders. So the cleanup fund staff got together, the management got together and put together a plan to address this backlog. And they set a goal of eliminating the backlog by the end of calendar year 2017. So they developed a number of process improvements to implement during that time. And the management team put together basically a plan with milestones and assignments and things like that. And we started implementing the project in February of 2017. And the things that they did to initially streamline the process were that we redirected a number of staff, both technical staff and the administrative staff, to work strictly on reimbursements. So we had to cross-train people in order to allow them to process the reimbursements. We instituted a triage process because there was what we saw was a big bottleneck in the technical staff, where when they had a really complicated case that they were working on, everything else kind of backed up behind it. So the staff every day, pretty much on a daily basis, went down and went through every reimbursement, and then were able to quickly move the ones that were easier and that could be done quickly and move those along rather than having this big bottleneck and backlog. And so we continued that triage process throughout this whole project. And during this time, we had always had a first in, first out process in the cleanup fund. And so that we suspended that, to get rid of that bottleneck. And also we took, a lot of times a claim would have multiple reimbursements in the queue. So we'd process all of those at once rather than, strictly sticking to the first in, first out. And then we developed a number of management reports to track our progress. So we made steady progress throughout the year in spring and summer, but we realized that we weren't going to quite make our goal. So we redirected additional staff come the fall and did more cross-training, looked for additional streamlining measures. And in December, we realized there's no way that we're going to make the goal by the end of the year. So we basically did an all-hands-on-deck approach in January. We realized that we had to extend the deadline out, so we only extended it 1 month. But basically, we took everyone from the cleanup fund and stopped what they were doing on all their other work, and the entire fund worked on getting over that final hump of those reimbursement requests. And at the end of January, we had completely eliminated that backlog of reimbursements. And so this is something that has never been achieved in the cleanup fund in its history, from its inception, is meeting that 60-day deadline. And that deadline essentially breaks down to about 30 days for the cleanup fund staff, about 15 days for the accounting staff, and 15 days for the controllers. So we don't have any control over accounting and the controllers, but the cleanup fund is consistently being able to meet our timeframes for reviewing reimbursements within that 30 days. So it's a huge accomplishment for the board, for the fund, for our stakeholders. All these projects have resumed. A lot of them had been suspended when we weren't able to pay people. So, and it's just really encouraged and motivated the staff there. And I'm so proud of them for this accomplishment. And so I'd like to ask Diane Barclay to come up, and she's going to say a few words. She was instrumental in getting us through that push. She joined the fund in, I think, September, and saw us through that final push. And then Diane's going to introduce the staff to come up and receive the award.
Ooh. My geologic beads are making sense. Anyway, hello. I'm so glad to be here. I think this is not only a Superior Accomplishment Award, but a Sustained Superior Accomplishment Award, because not only did we eliminate the backlog, as of last week, we have kept pace with no backlog for a year. So this is now how the fund operates, and I'm very proud of that. Also, when you consider that during this same time, we were navigating a new statewide accounting system.
That's right.
We were issuing 600 letters of commitment. We were going through some gnarly settlement issues. We also had an appeal backlog that we've reduced by more than 200 during this same time. And we submitted 525 case review summary reports. So we're humming over there, and I'm so proud of these folks, and I'm so glad to be able to work with them and to present these awards to them today. So we'll start with the workhorses. Audrey Shimizu. She represents the reimbursement section managed by Salika Potter. And these guys, they're where everything starts. That's where the reimbursement requests come in. So congratulations, job well done. This one's going in Salika's office. Photo op.
Yeah.
Next, we have the hydrogeology and engineering section, and that is managed by Ben Henningberg. And these are the folks that when there's a complex technical issue, the reimbursement request has to be reviewed by them. And they were instrumental in the triage and instrumental in getting that backlog out of here and did some really tough ones. So I'd like to ask Kirk Larson to come up. Mr. Review Summary Report. Congratulations. He's sick. We did the fist bump. And then we have the two sections that really pitched in to help at the end. We have our financing authorization section. Those are the folks that do the settlements and also eligibility. And they were crazy working on all kinds of stuff, but they stepped in and made some process improvements at the end that really helped us on the back end. So Burke Angel, representing that section, Christina Ochoa's section. Bien hecho. Okay, and then we have the last section, but not the least. This is our cleanup accounts section. They're full of mostly technical folks, and they stepped in to help on the technical side while they were still juggling a bunch of new SCAP sites and a bunch of new ECAP sites. I think we're up to 60 and 200 now, so that's great stuff. But Galvin Kaufman? Thank you. Good job. Picture.
Yes.
I just want to say a couple things. One is thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm sorry, Board Member Dodek isn't here. It's something we spent a lot of time on over the course of the years, fielding complaints and working with the team. And then what you've been able to do in this relatively short period of time is really extraordinary. And I just want to thank people for the combination of creativity, focus, and work on doing this. And so I hope you all feel as proud of yourselves as you should be, and it's having this huge burden. It's like the pig and the python, like gone. So I know there's plenty of work still to do and a lot of unsung heroes in the UST program, and I just want you to know we don't take you for granted, and we really appreciate the amazing work you've done. No good deed goes unpunished, though. So I would really love a short write-up of what you did as a process and an effort, et cetera, and I want to make sure to get it to everyone who's complained to me over the course of the last 5 years about this issue to show what you all did to deal with it. And the backlog is, to be clear, there are issues in the backlog that had nothing to do with you guys, that had to do with how things came in and that need to be vigilant about fraud. And the like. So figuring out how to do it, not just to move it through, but move it through with care to protect public dollars is a pretty big order, and you did a great job, and I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Great.
I just wanted to mention that Board Member Dodek did come to our all-staff meeting where we presented the award to
Oh, fantastic.
staff,
Great.
So it was great, and we really appreciated her coming to that meeting and her great words of encouragement to the staff. And I also wanted to respond to your requests that we are looking at. It's kind of one of the things we're doing is, the postmortem on it to make sure that, we weren't just overlooking things and letting fraud, run rampant in these. And so we're really taking a look at the process, and now that, because these reimbursements continue to come in.
Yeah.
So now we can look back and see, what worked really well in this project, and then, what we've learned from this whole project.
Great. Fantastic. Thanks so much.
Alicia, we have somebody to take pictures.
Oh, good. So we can go, well, we have to go.
Yeah. I'll have to come down here.
You may talk amongst yourselves, because it'll take us a half hour to get down there. On your iPhone, if you look at how, but you gotta have your phone with you all the time for that. All right. We're now on to the public forum, which is the part of our meeting where we hear from anyone who wants to talk about an issue that's not on the agenda. We don't have any of those. Next, minutes from the January 22nd board meeting. Motion?
Move to adopt.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, it passes, and I was absent, so I have to abstain on that vote. Very happy I'm not absent today. Current hydrologic conditions. Oh, yay. I was so sad that driving in, I didn't see the Sierra snow, but there was snow on Mount Tam, the snow all around the Bay Area. It was like, that's all they were talking about on the news. I guess it happens once a decade or so, but pretty exciting over there.
Good morning, board members.
Morning.
My name is Alessia Siglari. I'm an engineer with the Division of Water Rights. And with me here is Vadim Demchek. We are here to present item number 2, hydrology update for the Bay Delta watershed. As usual, we start with the Northern Sierra precipitation. We are at 103% of average with 29.7 inches of precipitation. This is a big improvements from last update, about 13 inches more. For what regards Central Sierra, we are at 108% of average for this day, and 23.1 inches of precipitation, with the 13 inches increase from last month update. In Southern Sierra is a 113% of average for this date, with current precipitation of 17 inches, with a change of 8.7 inches from last update.
Great.
Snow conditions look also good. We are, for North, Central, and South Sierra at 107, 117, and 119% of average, respectively. Reservoir condition for February 3rd show most of the reservoirs are at or more than average, and there's no significant changes from last update. If not that, everything looks a little better. Cachumba Reservoir as February 1st is at 34% of capacity and 45% of average, and Diamond Lake is at 87% of capacity. Drought conditions show the last update from January 29 show California with abnormally drought to moderate drought, with Northern California in severe drought conditions. As always, D0 represents abnormally dry conditions, D1 moderate drought, D2 severe, D3 extreme, and D4 exceptional drought. As you can see, 76% of the state falls between D0 and D4. And our last update in January, 70% of the state was instead between D1 and D4. So this was a good improvement. Temperature precipitation outlook, see California below normal, and for the 14-day outlook. And as far as precipitation, we are slightly above normal, with Southern California in a little better shape than Northern California. Colorado Basin drought sees Colorado at abnormally dry to exceptional drought, with the driest condition in the corner of Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. See, about 65% of the area falls between D1 and D4. Again, moderate drought to exceptional drought. And we added here Colorado River Basin snow water equivalent. As you can see, the map show mostly green and light blue colors that represent between 91 to 110% of median, and between 111 and 130% of median, respectively. And during last month update,
It's interesting.
we were asked to give an update about Lake Mead, which, yes, is working.
That's the slide.
As we probably all know, is experiencing some very low levels of storage. And last month average, so January 2019, ended with an average capacity of 10 million, about 10,500,000 acre-feet, which is about 35% of total capacity and 52% of historical average. Well, we're looking for, or after, a shortage in the near future, but good news, last Thursday, a legislation was passed in Arizona that will allow Arizona to join the 3-state drought contingency plan together with California and Nevada to reduce the risks of Lake Mead rise. So this concludes our presentation. We're here to answer any questions that might arise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's interesting having the fact that we follow Kachuma so closely that the percentages don't seem that much higher despite, did you see all the videos of the waters flooding into Kachuma and the higher reservoirs finally spilling? Yeah. So maybe we'll see what happens over the course of the next week with the continuing higher chance of precipitation, and that's the one we've been watching so closely. And at some point, quite apart from the hydrological report, and appreciate you adding the Colorado, I'm looking at Mr. Oppenheimer and Ms. Sobek. We should probably, they're busy right now because they're dealing with that, but it might be nice to have an informational item on the Colorado River, just in general for people, because I think we tend to spend so much time on the Delta, and we don't spend as much time on the Colorado since it's a federally managed river, and there's just so much going on, and the interplay between the two of them in Southern California is so intense. So no rush on it, but it would be interesting to have an informational item on that and work with a number of the parties to talk about it without interrupting the very tough work that they're all doing right now. That'd be great. Well, great. Any other questions? Any comments, questions? Thanks so much, as always. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Item number 3 is our urban water conservation monthly report. Oh, thank you. All of a sudden, I know there's something about it that's sort of minion-y. Not to call you a minion, but just the scale is strange. We got Game of Thrones, we got Minions, we got it all in this room. Thank you, great.
Good morning, Chair Marcus.
Good morning.
The board. This is informational item number 3, update on urban water conservation. My name is Jelena Hartman. I'm a senior scientist in your Office of Research Planning and Performance, and to my right is Kathy Prevert, also a senior scientist in the office. We are bringing a summary of the key results for December 2018, and also actually look back at the calendar year 2018. In December 2018, urban water production was 18.4% below the urban water production in 2013. And this report is based on 88% of suppliers reporting. So the 360 suppliers that submitted report for December 2018 serve about 95% of the population served by the entire 409 urban water suppliers in California. So we have pretty good representation. Those 360 urban water suppliers reported urban water production 23.5 billion gallons below what their urban water production was in 2013 in December. And those savings are enough to supply water to more than 700,000 people with water for 1 year. In December 2018, we've had residential use at 65 gallons per person per day. And so that was one of the lowest months of use in past year.
Do you, on that, obviously there's a difference between November and December, and we don't stress out about it as much in the winter months because the total water use is lower, but do you attribute that much higher number just the fact that it was raining and people knew to turn their sprinklers off? Or is there more to it than that?
The December savings are greater. Typically, the production is lower than in November, so we saw that last year as well, that December 2018 production was below November. We did get rain, and typically residential use is also lower per person per day in December as compared to November. So we continued to trend down, and in fact, on this chart that shows the summary of urban water production throughout the year in the dark, solid blue line, shows that December, all the way at the right-hand side, was below November production. And the solid blue line is based on the 360 reports that we did receive, and the dashed blue line shows the estimated production, because we know we have missing reports for each month, and so we've made an estimate what the production would have been. And one thing that we can note is that throughout much of 2018, urban water production tracked pretty well with 2017. 2017 is shown in white line. One thing that we see in January and February of 2017, which was record wet, we also had all-time low monthly water production. So that February 2017, we've never had lower urban water production since we started to track these data 55 months ago. And so we also had the biggest water savings in the first quarter of any year in 2017. And kind of the opposite when we then switch into this 2018 line, which was pretty close to the blue shaded area, which is the 2013 baseline for 409 urban water suppliers. And in fact, if we look at the white line on the right-hand side, so we're looking at November and December of 2017, we see that that use is a little bit higher, and it was pretty dry time of the year. So when we then look at the start of 2018, we entered that year with significant precipitation deficit, and we didn't really have much precipitation for a while before the year started. So that's reflected in that higher use. And although the rest of the 2018, we've tracked urban water production close to 2017, we never really caught up with those water savings that were lost early in the year. We see that perhaps best summarized in this look back at the past 4 years. So these are annual summaries of urban water production shown in dark blue bars. What we see is dark blue bar set against the lighter blue shaded bar, which is the baseline for the suppliers and the months that we have reports for. So these are the actual reports that we have in our database. And the reason we are not using just the same fixed baseline, because in 2017, we started to have voluntary participation in monthly reporting. So we don't have complete reports, and that baseline is maybe 0.5% lower than the baseline in 2015 and 16. And then in 2018, we do have more incomplete record, so that baseline is maybe 5% lower, because we do have reports from suppliers that represent about 95% of the population. So the comparison of the reports always goes against the baseline only for suppliers that reported in that period. And so for 2018, annual cumulative savings are more than 291 billion gallons, and that's more than 14% for the year. We can look and compare these savings to 2017, where savings were around 16%. And that is somewhat lower than the 21% that we saw during the peak of the drought when we had mandatory water conservation targets that were set for each supplier. With the December reports in, we also were able to estimate statewide average residential gallons per person per day for 2018, and that was 91 gallons per person per day. We see that that's pretty close to last year and well below the estimated residential use of 109 gallons per person per day in 2013. Obviously, the lowest use was reported during that peak of water conservation in 2015 and 2016. But we're looking pretty good for 2018. And a reminder that 2014 is shown here as a gap because we started data collection midway through the year, so we don't have complete set to give an annual estimate for 2014. And we'll close with the next steps. I'll actually turn it over to Kathy, who is the lead staff on the reporting, but I will first address the last step on the right-hand side. We have had staff busy at work holding stakeholder workshops for water loss control regulation. This kicked off in the spring of last year, and there was a series of workshops throughout the year. And in fact, we had a workshop yesterday in Chino. And the expectation is that the draft regulation for water loss control will be released sometime in early July after an additional workshop. So stay tuned for that. But I will now turn it over to Kathy to tell you what else is going on in the reporting.
Yeah, I just have a few words to add. So we are in the process right now of evaluating our move forward, or whether to move forward or not with a reporting rulemaking. As Yelena mentioned, it has been voluntary since 2017, end of 2017, and so we're considering that and ask for board member feedback on that. Okay. And then also, we are in the process to streamline reporting. And this is something that, with the passage of the new conservation legislation, SB 606 and AB 1668, that is something that is in there that we should look at removing some of the redundancies in reporting. And last week, we met with the Aqua Reporting Work Group, and they shared with us some of the redundancies that they have found. We will have some follow-up meetings to explore those further. And there are a number of considerations, because we have, the software sort of technical aspects of it. We have to look at what's needed and how data are used. So there's a number of considerations that we'll be exploring, not only with our urban water suppliers, but also with the NGOs who are also using this data.
Great.
And so that's all I had. If you have any questions or comments.
So that's good. Any questions or comments? We do have one public comment card.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. This is very useful information, and I appreciate getting the updates. One thing I just want to point out is that, as time goes on, we started tracking in 2013, everything's reported off a 2013 baseline. So the more years that pass, you report the total water savings, but it's not normalized for population growth. So that's one thing where I see the value in that and for comparison purposes. But I think as the years click along here, we start to look at the differences in hydrology, but also population starts to weigh in on that and just increase housing stock and things of that nature. So thus the reason I think the significance of looking at residential per capita day, which of course we're doing as well. But it does become a little less informative, I would say, as time goes on.
Yeah, that's where the per capita is really important to have in the charts as well. I think we'll be keeping this for a while until we move into what the next phase is. So it's just useful to keep it going. Also, it's nice to be able to say attaboy, attagirl for folks, and as a sense of whether the drought memory is holding.
Yeah, and I just say that because I think the savings is even better than what we realize when we look at a percent year-over-year savings in total water production. I think it's actually quite commendable with what we've accomplished.
No, excellent point.
I can't even reach this, okay?
No, you got to pull it closer.
Thank you. This is helpful as always. And we just had, I had my briefing yesterday, and as you mentioned, the redundancies, not to put you on the spot because you may not recall, but can you think of an example of duplicative reporting or a redundancy that Aqua raised when you met with them?
One thing was pointed out is that we ask for monthly data in our monthly report, and then there are also there's an annual report that also asks for monthly water production, and so it's the same data or similar data that is reported. But there's a time lag that we face with some of the other the annual report data. We get that about a year and a half after some months. So one consideration is the timeliness of data and how we're using it. So there are ways, we talked a little bit, very briefly, about real-time data and what opportunities might exist so that you could have data collected and it automatically populates some of the annual reporting so you don't have to re-enter some of those data. And so that might be something to look at.
Wow, that sounds like something that hopefully in this new era of data and the new government-wide focus on it that we'll be able to do across the board in a lot of places, because I'm sure there are just a zillion places where people are having to keep their data and punch the same data in on a separate, I mean, we all have to do it all the time when we fill out forms, even for the same thing, that are, you're saying the same thing over and over again. So the dream of being able to enter data once and having it talk to other reports is something we should all aspire to. So that's a pretty good point overall.
Yeah, and I think it's why our open data resolution is really quite powerful, and the work that I know Greg's shop is doing to, not just in the drinking water program, but writ large throughout the agency, really do take stock and say, well, where is information coming into us as an agency and organization? Where is it being stored? What are the formats? Track it throughout its life cycle. Where does it go through QA, QC, and how is it being turned back around and provided to the public and the NGOs and everybody else? Because there's a lot we can do with it. We need to do better with it. I think it saves a lot of staff time, certainly, to be able to know that everyone's looking at the same sort of bit of information. It's not being reported twice between the various divisions. But it's also empowering for communities to have that information, because it empowers their decision-making processes as much as it drives ours. So cool. It's great work, and look forward to conversations with staff further about that.
Great. I'm going to go to take the public comment. It's Paul Helliker from San Juan Water District. Welcome. Morning.
Here we go.
Actually, even talking into it, it's not a great system. So I'm going to remind people you should probably speak a little slowly, because it gets, at least from how I'm hearing it up here, it gets a little garbled in the room. So
Okay, I'll do my best to slow down here a little
no,
bit.
you're a good enunciator. It should be fine.
The green light's on. Thanks for the opportunity to come and chat with you this morning. Kathy did mention the group that Aqua has put together. We've organized ourselves into a number of different work groups to focus on, different aspects of the new regulatory program that you all and Department of Water Resources will be involved with. So we do have one on, one on outdoor standards, indoor standards, water loss, and so on. And we do have one on reporting as well. And so we took some time over the past couple of months to take a look at a number of different reports that we all do to try to identify places where we could improve the ability to do what you just suggested, which is develop the data and provide it to the state agencies once, so that that information then could be used in different mechanisms. And so Kathy did mention the electronic annual report. That report does actually give you a lot more and provides, and you have that data going back a number of years, provides you a lot more detail on monthly water production and use by customer class and so on. And so we provide that to you every year. We've been providing that to you every year, I think since the early 2010s. And then even before that, Department of Water Resources collected similar information. And then that covers, sorry, that covers not just the 300 and something agencies that have been reporting on the monthly reporting, but all the public water systems that are subject to the electronic annual report. So it's an extensive database, and I think it's one that you may want to consider using for the purposes of looking at the trends, because 2013 was a date that you picked in 2015 for the regulatory program,
Right.
but it may not necessarily be the best analysis to use. What we've done in the Sacramento area, and I know you've probably seen information in other parts of the state, we've starting now looking back 30 years and seeing how not just water production and use have evolved, but also population.
Right.
So that you can compare what those trends mean. And that does translate into gallons per capita per day, but that will be one component of the new regulatory program that covers not just indoor use, but also outdoor use, commercial use. And there'd be different metrics for those,
Right.
looking at pretty much gallons per acre or gallons per customer. So we're optimistic that we can come up with a solution that works for everyone. We had a great discussion last week. We started talking in the fall about the electronic annual report. So I think, and we have a table we put together that covers a number of different reports. One new one that we will have starting formally in 2021, but water agencies are now working on the format to start reporting this year, is the annual supply and demand report, which actually covers a lot of the territory that the monthly conservation reports
Right.
have been covering, looking at what sort of drought actions are you taking, what sort of enforcement mechanisms are needed, and so on. So I think that'll be a new tool that we can use, and then that will also eliminate the need for that information from the monthly reports. Because if you look at the monthly database, not much has changed over the past 3 years on the drought, on the action level and the enforcement requirements. The main changes, and you see them on your monthly reports here, have been in the water production data. So thanks to your staff and
Thank you.
DWR staff and for your interest in this particular issue. And I think over the next couple of months, we'll have a good program to present to you.
Well, that's great. I'm really glad to hear that. I also think as we move into the discussions about the more long-term efficiency legislation, I'm just looking forward to the time when we are able to have these customized targets, because as you know, we've discussed the percentages and even the gallons per capita are a crude proxy for change in what's going on, when in fact each area is very differently situated in terms of climate and the like. And we're going to have to take some work to figure out how to articulate that in a narrative to the public. It responds to the public's desire during the drought for fairness and for having some sort of equitable way to think about how much water seems right. Again, it's not at drought level, but something. But we spent an awful lot of time during the drought with caveats on this data as useful in a time of drought and to keep track of where we've been. But we're going to be at a much more sophisticated and customized level of discussion. So we're going to need to talk that through with you all as well, so that the fact that it's not quite as simple doesn't detract from the fact that it's impressive work that people are doing and going to be doing.
Yeah, if I could make another comment. As representative of one of the poster children for the excessive water users in the state from San Juan Water District, I think one of the downsides of the gallons per capita per day measure is that it doesn't really take into account areas where you have large properties, high temperatures, and things like that. So we're looking forward to having a better tool to determine whether or not we're using water efficiently. And I predict, based upon just some back-of-the-envelope calculations, that will go from being one of the highest users on a gallons per capita per day basis to hopefully one of the lower users in terms of efficiency. So that's my goal. I want to have a gold star rather than whatever we had. But we did do, back in 2015, our district
Yeah, you
did do quite a bit to reduce use, and we had a 36% reduction target, and we met that. So,
Yeah, you did.
we do have a good track record. But I'm looking forward to this new era. I think in 2009, when SBX 77 came through, that it was probably the best tool we had at the time. But now that we're doing the landscape surveys and getting more refined data, I think it'll be a better picture to paint for the state.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Great. Anything else? Thank you very much. Thanks for the time on the committee as well. That's important work. All right. Item number 4, Division of Financial Assistance.
Good morning, Chair Marcus, members of the board, Christopher Stevens, supervising minion with the Division of Financial Assistance. And I have Zach Biller here from the Office of Chief Counsel with me as well. So here to talk about proposed amendment to the policy for implementing the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, very similar to a recent change with the Clean Water SRF policy. I'll just talk a little bit about background, purpose of the amendment. We did get some comments during the public comment period, so won't go over those, go over every comment, but I'll try to highlight some of the more significant ones. And then we did make some changes to the policy relative to what was put out for public comment, and then wrap up with the schedule and implementation. So as you may recall, the drinking water program in its entirety came from the Department of Public Health on July 1st of 2014. That was the official date that was transferred to the Water Board, and part of that was the Drinking Water SRF program. And shortly thereafter, the board adopted a drinking water SRF policy, very similar to the Clean Water SRF policy that's been in place since 1989 or so. That policy hasn't been amended since then. You may recall when I presented the clean water policy, on average that policy's been amended about every 2.5 years. So if we think the drinking water policy is very similar, well, we're probably a little overdue for an amendment. Up to this point, we have made some changes and adjustments in the program, and those have been done through the annual IUPs that come to the board. Purposes of the amendment, of course, reinforce and bring some of those changes that we've done on a year-by-year basis in the IEP, bring those into the policy, better manage. There is increased demand on the Drinking Water SRF Fund, not to the magnitude with the Clean Water SRF Fund. I did look this morning in our database, and we've probably got about $1.2 billion in applications that are in various stages. We can fund maybe $400 or $500 million of that. So not quite as impacted as the Clean Water SRF, but we are trying to increase demand on the program. Similar to the clean water policy, we are introducing some changes to the credit evaluation process, and of course an ongoing process of making the words on the page clearly reflect what the policies are and what we want to do with the program.
That's always a good effort.
Yeah, it's an ongoing process. And of course try to be as consistent as we can with the Clean Water SRF policy. So we did get 5 comment letters that were received by the deadline, and like I say, I won't go through them point by point, but a couple of the highlight some of the more significant comments. The first one, we did get a couple of comments from folks urging us to look at programmatic financing. In other words, we have applicants that have a number of projects, have a number of projects in their capital improvement plans. As I've talked about in the past, there are some practical difficulties with that in California. The examples we've seen have been states that have one large borrower. I could probably off the top of my head name 10 or 15 very large borrowers, so we haven't given up on that idea. We're always looking for ways to more efficiently manage projects. But that's kind of an ongoing process as well.
Yeah, as you know, that's when I would like to be involved in the follow-on on that. I mean, we're not New York, so it's a little different, but I still think there's merit in figuring out how to do this.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I did get a couple of comments regarding the debt service coverage formula. Some folks thought that that was complicated. It really wasn't a great change from our perspective. We did make some changes to that coverage formula. We'll certainly work with applicants to make sure that they understand how that impacts them. And there was a comment regarding the additional debt test requirements. So in the case where an applicant has some existing senior debt, most folks would choose to, if they refinance that debt, they would want to keep the same lien position. If it was a senior debt, they'd want it to stay a senior debt. But there was one applicant that said, well, we might want to reduce the lien position of that. And so again, the words on the page didn't exactly reflect that. So we did change that to say you could keep the same lien position for that refinance debt, or if you wanted to take a lower lien position, that would, of course, be fine with the program from a program perspective. A couple of commenters did think there was potentially a conflict between the language in the policy and the new credit review appendix that we've created. We don't see a conflict there, so we've tried to clarify that in our response to comments, and so I'll just leave that at that. Did get a comment from the folks that represent disadvantaged communities that indicating that financing for severely disadvantaged communities must always be in the form of principal forgiveness. We're certainly mindful of the fact that it's very difficult for those communities to afford loan. I think most of them do wind up with 100% grant or principal forgiveness financing. We would only look to loans if they could actually afford that. And so the first attempt is always to provide 100% grant and principal forgiveness financing for those communities.
Is that something where, for EPA purposes, we have to go through a thought process on it?
Is there anything in EPA guidance or regulations? I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Okay, so it's all in our discretion?
So the federal rules require that the system be disadvantaged, but state statute requires not only disadvantaged status, but also an inability to afford the financing.
Right, so that's the analysis.
State statute.
I knew it was somewhere.
Another comment was urging us to integrate drinking water actions and applications with clean water SRF applications, and that's certainly a big objective of the Office of Sustainable Water Solutions. They're looking to try to be as efficient as they can. In some cases, the same agency would manage those projects. In some cases, they don't. But again, they're certainly looking for those opportunities to try to be as efficient with our staff as well as provide the best service to the applicants that they can. One comment came in that we should include multiple benefit project and integrate that into the priority system. We chose not to make any great changes to the priority system this time for the drinking water SRF. As I say, we are looking to fund more projects. We're not as impacted on the drinking water SRF. I think in a future amendment, we will look at potentially changing the priority system. But at this point, we can basically fund all projects that are ready to proceed. And so we'll put that on the list of things to look at in the future. We did get a couple of comments asking us to look at the bond rating threshold for, again, we're introducing some flexibility into the credit review process. And so particularly for those borrowers that are highly rated, have a lot of their own debt from the municipal bond market, And so there was a suggestion that we look at that threshold. As with the Clean Water SRF, this is a new approach that we're taking. We developed these guidelines in conjunction with our municipal advisor. So we do want to see, test them out a little bit. We're certainly going to talk with stakeholders and see about adjusting those in the future. But for the time being, we think it's best to just try that out first. And then the last comment I'll highlight here is the suggestion was to remove the word adopt from the section that deals with water rate studies. And so we did agree with that comment, and so we have removed that word. We replaced it with to the satisfaction of the Deputy Director of the Division of Financial Assistance. So some of these projects are constructed over a very long time period, and so it's not always possible to adopt rates, say, 8 years into the future.
Oh my gosh, yeah, really.
That potentially creates a problem for them. So as I say, we did make some changes relative to the public review draft. As I say, we removed the word adopted from that section dealing with water rate studies. Again, we've clarified the lien position requirements for refinancing existing debt. If someone wants to take a lower lien position, that would be favorable to the program. Staff did make a couple of other changes here. We've clarified that applicants must submit budget projections through the first principal and interest payment. Again, trying to get the words right on the page. We've introduced that the executive director can amend the operating agreement with EPA and emphasize that actions taken under previous versions of the policy, those remain in effect. Last slide here, just a quick implementation schedule. Of course, we're at February 5th today at the board meeting. We have some staff training scheduled both with DFA staff as well as Division of Drinking Water staff during February and March. We're in the process in the early stages of preparing next year's IUP, the 1920 IUP. So we'll be preparing that fundable list during March, and then hopefully put a draft of that IUP out for public review in early April, and then shooting for adoption of next year's IUP at the June board meeting. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Terrific. Do we have any questions or comments before public comment? Not yet. All right, we have one comment card, Michael Carlin from the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Carlin, and thank you for all the time your staff has spent with us on trying to be innovative on this and all the time they will spend in the months and years to come.
Well, thank you, Chair Marcus, members of the board. For the record, I'm Michael Carlin, Deputy General Manager for the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. And we're a water, wastewater, and power provider in San Francisco and a water provider in the greater Bay Area. We serve about 2.6 million people. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this important program. First off, we want to thank your staff. We really appreciate the hard work they did on this. They received our comments, they've responded to our comments, and we really thank them for responding to the comments by revising the policy to clarify how applicants must demonstrate sufficient rates for operating and maintaining the system. That was important to us. As you know, you don't want to adopt rates 30 years in advance and try to hold to them. That politically is suicide. We actually support the new credit financial guidelines that you have developed for the Clean Water and Drinking Water State Revolving Fund Program, which results in a more streamlined negotiation process, so thank you for that. Our comment letter noted some specific recommendations and revisions to those guidelines, which we believe are consistent with industry standards, and we are willing to continue to work with staff, with our finance staff, working with your finance staff, to reconsider those suggestions, and maybe we can come to a compromise on those going forward. You're a key partner to providing affordable and reliable services in our service area, the communities that we serve. And one of the things that we always kind of make mention of is that, San Francisco is a very rich city, but we have disadvantaged communities located within the city. And so we want to make sure that we can maintain our commitment to our ratepayers and making sure that it's affordable going into the future. So that's why this program is really important to us. We will continue to work with you and any other partners that you would like us to work with to continue to grow the long-term stability of the program and making the program available for all. And we're going to work on an application now that I heard some money was available. So thank you, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Great. No, thanks. I know it's been interesting, particularly as we've moved out some of the payment periods over the time that the larger cities are coming in. That's why I appreciate the extent of time and Mr. Sandler's acumen and others who've worked with us. And so now we have far more interest from the large communities who were doing major upgrades of things that were funded by grant funds when there was federal grant money around at the beginning of the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act, and stuff's wearing out in addition. So figuring out how to deal with that additional large set of players who are really doing some cutting edge things, I think it requires a lot of time on your part also to work with us. The policies, obviously in individual cases when things come up, staff can come to us outside the policies. You continue to work through, but it's got to be thought through. But I really appreciate all the person hours that you all have put in. You have some colleagues in some of the other cities as well, but I think you're doing the heavy lifting, and we appreciate it a lot.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Good. All right. Any other comments or? Thank you for this ongoing effort. I know the whole thing has been iterative, and it's you all are. I always know that you're keeping the public trust in mind and managing these monies as carefully as you can, which is exactly, I think, what the public would want. But I also appreciate all the time that your team and Ms. Hartridge and others in legal have spent on trying to figure out how we move into this sort of brave new era where hopefully we can find more money for this maybe eventually we'll get more than WIFIA, we'll get a real infrastructure bill coming out of the feds, and there'll be some grant money again, which would really be terrific, not just for us, but particularly for some of the older cities across the country. So fingers crossed that'll happen in the next few years. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks staff for all the great work on this, particularly being open to ways that we can be innovative with our dollars. I think there's definitely a success story to be told with the drinking water division of drinking water coming over along with the SRF over these last years, and those opportunities to pair up the clean water revolving fund and drinking water revolving fund dollars is it's going to be interesting to see how we can continue to be creative in that space. So just thanks staff for all that. Look forward to further discussion. So move to adopt the resolution.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Great. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, there we go. Thank you very much. Nicely done. All right, moving right along to item number 5. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Why don't we let's just take a 7-minute break or something like that and come back around a quarter till, just to be kind. Thank you for that reminder. All right, I'm on. All right, we are back. I could make comments, but I won't. We are back. It is 10:46 a.m. and we have item 5 and 6. I'll consider them as a group. And I understand we have no comment cards. I know you've been working directly with folks, but nonetheless, I think the policy is important and new. And so if staff, if you can do an abbreviated presentation, but I would like you to go through your slides for folks who may have tuned in to listen, because you've done a lot of work with people figuring out how to update it, as you said you would need to. And so I think it's important to go through it. Okay.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Marcus and board members. My name is Stan Schultz, and I'm with the Division of Water Rights. And to my right is Kevin Porzio with Division of Water Quality, and to his right, Tim Regan. And then to my left is Lily Weaver with Office of Chief Counsel. So we'll go through a abbreviated version of the presentation today and probably focus mainly on the public comments received. But we'll go through briefly the responsibilities, timelines and schedules, and the proposed updates and comments. So the Water Board's responsibilities under cannabis legislation is to ensure the effects of water diversion and discharge do not negatively impact the in-stream flows needed for fishery resources and water quality. And we were directed to adopt principles and guidelines or requirements as part of policies for water quality control to ensure that. So the way the policy works is it gets implemented into 3 main programs: the General Order, the Small Irrigation Use Registration Program, and California Department of Food and Agriculture's Cal Cannabis Cultivation Licensing. This is our timeline. We're currently at the board meeting here, and then if the policy is adopted today, we would get it off to the Office of Administrative Law for approval, and that should occur on or about April 2nd. So the main proposed updates to the cannabis policy focus on 4 items: conditionally exempt indoor cultivation sites, tribal buffers, on-stream reservoirs, and winterization. And then there's also minor cleanup and clarifications based on feedback. So for the indoor cultivation sites, this requirement clarifies the conditional exemption for indoor cultivation. I need to comply with the cannabis policy and all applicable requirements attached to them in A, and it was also added to allow for tank and haul options for indoor cultivation sites. So we also provided an exemption for existing and future indoor cultivation sites from the riparian setbacks and the tribal setbacks. There's 2 different versions of this. It depends October 1st, 2018, so there's conditions prior to that and then after that, and I'll walk you through those real quick. So in both situations, indoor cultivators would need a building permit on file and a valid certificate of occupancy for indoor cannabis cultivation, and either be connected to a wastewater treatment collection system, or they can do the tank and haul if they're not connected. So that's prior to October 1st, 2018. After moving forward, after October 1st, 2018, the main difference here is that they need to be connected to a wastewater treatment system. The purpose of this is to kind of limit the geographic area of where these sites are located. We're kind of targeting more urban areas, more developed areas for this exemption to apply. We also provided some clarity and some flexibility for the tribal requirements, in particular the 600-foot buffer. We provided the tribes with the ability to have a 45-day review period and accept, reject, or remain silent, which would be considered acceptance if cannabis cultivation sites within 600 feet are on tribal land. We also, in response to comments received from the tribes, we added an extension that the tribes can request if needed. And then the other options is the tribe can just inform the State Water Board that they do not approve of any cannabis cultivation on or within 600 feet, and then we would automatically reject those sites that come through. Or they can also just issue a waiver for on within 600 feet or any portion of their tribal land and say we would automatically approve these, and we would proceed. With the 45-day waiver period, we would follow up with the tribe to make sure they received a letter and had adequate time to review, and that they were in fact remaining silent before we took action. So our other updates are on-stream reservoirs. Here we're basically certain pre-existing on-stream reservoirs. We're allowing them to come into the Small Irrigation Use Registration Program. There's quite a few requirements. One is that it has to exist prior to October 1st, 2016, and that the Division of Water Rights and California Department of Fish and Wildlife would then go out and make a determination that it is, that removal of the reservoir and installation of off-stream storage would cause more environmental damage than just continuing to operate the reservoir and bring it into compliance with policy conditions. So as part of filing for the cannabis small irrigation use registration, the cannabis culture would request that determination, and they would accept any conditions imposed by the Deputy Director or California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And then they could only withdraw the water during the dry season forbearance period to make sure that they weren't filling, and we want these reservoirs in some situations just to fill and spill, not continuing to dampen the effect of high flows. And then in some situations, the reservoir may need to be removed or rendered incapable of storing water. So we also, since we added on-stream reservoirs, we also added a measurement requirement that's pretty similar to the measurement requirements for off-stream. And here they need to install a measuring device such as a water level sensor and record water depths hourly. And then they also need to have a professional come out and develop an area capacity curve so that can be converted to volume. And in response to comments, we also did a short notice on some updates to the winterization requirements. And these were 2 updates, one to allow use of heavy equipment during the winter season if authorized as part of a site management plan. This is really looking at standard agriculture equipment. And then also more flexibility in the application of linear sediment controls to allow them to be installed around the cultivated area versus through it. This is kind of recognizing where a lot of cultivation has been moving into more standard ag land. Some other updates, we made corresponding updates to the general order, as well as some other simple or small cleanups, and then also updated the staff report. And we did a updated cost analysis for the on-stream reservoirs. So comments received from the tribal comments specifically, they were generally supportive. They, as I mentioned, they provided some proposed language and also requested the either 60 and 90 days, a longer period for review, or an extension, which we incorporated. And the last one there for the indoor cultivation buffer exemption, we just added what the tribe might issue as well for approval on their lands. We did receive some that were not supportive, looking at the 600-foot buffer to be expanded. We felt that it's a reasonable buffer distance at this point. And then also to allow them to withdraw approval of new sites as well as existing sites within 600 feet if they change their mind. But since this is on private property, that change would be in the would-be investments that would have occurred. We did not update that. And then one tribe did not support the riparian tribal buffer exemption. For public comments, we also received a request to grandfather sites that existed prior to the cannabis policy adoption date. We did not incorporate that one. We felt it was important to give the tribes an opportunity to weigh in. For on-stream reservoirs, to reduce requirements and make them easier to obtain, we feel we've kind of set up a pretty streamlined process to handle on-stream reservoirs, and they still need some oversight. For the written copy manufacturer specifications for tanks, the comment was that they don't have the original manufacturer specifications, so we added clarity that that can be available online or in hard copy if it's available from the manufacturer. And then for indoor cultivation, we got a number of comments related to greenhouses to qualify for indoor cultivation and make definitions less strict. We did not update the indoor definitions. There is some flexibility within those to address many of the commenters' concerns. And then, of course, the winterization updates. We also received a number of comments that were not related to the proposed updates, such as redefining cultivation site to only include facilities used for drying, curing, grading if they pose a threat to water quality. This is already in the policy, so an update was not needed. We got a number of comments related to Region 1 property-wide requirements for legacy activities. This is part of their sediment TMDL implementation process, so we didn't have any flexibility on that one. And then a number of comments related to the in-stream flow requirements. These comments were a little bit more towards something we'll address when we go through the regional policy development. And then in addition, better coordination for the water boards and the CDFW and Department of Food and Agriculture. We've been doing our best to coordinate and line up programs, but there's always going to be some differences between them. So we've been working to reach out to everybody and try to clarify those. Provide incentives for good actors. The general order, the price, the cost for the general order is already kind of set up to benefit the better actors that have their site more stable and more environmentally set up, as well as providing more technical assistance and acknowledge the cost and logistical barriers for cultivators seeking a contract with qualified professionals. So we addressed a lot of those comments and think that we have the flexibility within the current version of the policy. Important web pages. Our main cannabis program is waterboards.ca.gov/cannabis. And then we also have our cannabis cultivation application portal. And then we also do a lot of outreach on using social media. And so we encourage people to follow us there too on Instagram and our Facebook and Twitter feed. And this is just contact information and for each of the programs. And that's all we have today. Any questions?
I know we've all had briefings on it, but please.
Yeah.
Hi, Dan. Thank you. Good presentation. Do we have an estimate of how many on-stream dams are out there that might come to us for permitting?
I believe the number that when we last checked was somewhere around 50 to 60 that have potentially already come into our portal and are trying to get through the process. Outside of that, we've heard a number of stakeholders that say that was a roadblock to them coming into the program. So hard to estimate how many, but we think probably in the hundreds.
Okay, because I know a lot of these facilities exist today, and I'm sure the cannabis cultivators are anxious to have their small irrigation use registration water right in place so they can proceed with their Cal Cannabis licensing. What steps are we taking to ensure that if the policy is adopted today, that the cultivators will have time to get their water rights in place before this upcoming diversion season?
We are planning on moving through the ones that we've already received to start there, and hoping that once people start to file, we can start to work through the determination that basically the way it's set up is that they will be issued their small irrigation use registration when they apply for it, assuming that the application is complete, and then we will work on the determinations following up. So it should be as fast as an off-stream reservoir as far as getting the certificate and being able to use that water.
I just think it's something that's good. I do have some concerns about the determination process because I know it's something where we're essentially going to be issuing the cultivator almost a conditional water right, and there might be situations where we have to take it back and ask them to remove the facility, the dam, after the fact. So I think that's just something that we should keep an eye on and track and see how long it takes and sort of what the conditions are and sort of the outcome of this. I think overall the idea behind finding an expedited pathway for the cannabis cultivators and even for some on-stream dam facilities makes sense. Although I am, there are other areas, other agricultural commodities, for example, grape growers in certain areas, in fact, in most of the state, that don't have access to similar types of expedited permitting pathways. So, another thing to think about is, how down the road we can identify ways to make these types of permits available to other small irrigation uses throughout the state.
Yes, we agree, and we've been meeting with the Wine Institute and Trout Unlimited to start having those discussions as well.
Yeah.
That's great. I agree with Board Member McGuire and be happy to work with you on those other agricultural uses going forward. So I just have a couple of questions more along the lines of the general comments, keeping in mind that we haven't seen the use of this program as much as we would have hoped. And then also the concern about the level playing field for those that have stepped up. And so the comments that were raised regarding better coordination between the Water Board and CDFA, and then also more technical assistance. Do you have any comments on that? How can we improve? I think generally speaking, you get high marks. Staff gets high marks for the technical assistance. So just wondering what was behind that comment in particular.
Well, I think one of it is that there's they feel there's so many different hoops that they have to hop through in order to get their permits. So, that's something where we do have quarterly meetings with Department of Food and Ag and DFW on the permitting side of it, as well as enforcement and other components in subgroups. And we're looking at the different applications, different things that people need to submit, and see if there's any ways to help streamline some of that information so that we're not all asking for the same thing if we can just get it from somebody else or from one of the different agencies. And then with part of the Department of Fish and Wildlife, a lot of that was on their lake and streambed alteration agreements and how those don't always match up. Both the permitting authorities to issue those as well as the requirements are sometimes different than what's in the policy.
Okay. In light of your response, I think it'd be helpful. I know that we've got in the executive director's report an update on the program, but it'd be great to include ongoing efforts with CDFA. I think this kind of matches up with the earlier conversation we had on water conservation, and where there's the possibility to reduce duplicative requirements, whether it's streamlining, one-stop shop, however it can be approached to just make it easier for people to comply.
All right. Thank you. Do we need to take these separately? All right. Do I have a motion?
Move to adopt the cannabis policy.
And the best bet is to say it as move to adopt the draft resolution for item number 5 on the cannabis policy.
Okay. Move to adopt the draft resolution for item number 5 on the cannabis policy.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that carries. Let's move on to item number 6. Thanks. I know this going quickly understates how much work went into this on your part, as well as the folks from the industry that have spent time, and really appreciate it and the care you've taken. You had to do the first thing really fast, so we knew we were going to come up with these, and there'll probably be more too as we go forward. So thanks. All right, item number 6.
Yes, for item number 6, they were combined. The general order updates included minor cleanups, and to be consistent with the cannabis policy and attachment A requirements. So,
Terrific. So now we just do another motion that says
Update or adopt the
Proposed updates.
I'll move adoption for the proposed updates to the cannabis policy. General order. Cannabis general order.
I get a second?
I'll second.
All right, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Again, thank you. Same comment. Appreciate all the work on this. And I think your design on your materials is pretty cool. I mean, it's nice. Sorry, Tam's not here. We always comment on the design quality of the stuff. Appreciate it. All right, we're on to board member reports. Who would like to speak first?
I have something.
People are looking at their calendars. You brought handouts.
I brought great handouts. I was very excited. Well, I was just talking with Board Member Esquivel about this. I attended Region 3 Central Coast board meeting, and mainly wanted to structure my time around being there for the environmental justice and human right to water update. And we received they received a really good presentation from a whole group, Community Water Center, the county, of course, the regional board, but I found it most interesting to hear from Dr. Cohen from UCLA that's been working on this innovative treatment project. And so, I think that we should set up a tour once it actually comes online. So
Madeline was saying she really wanted us all out there to see it.
yeah, so it's not up and running yet, but there are 3 sites in the Salinas Valley, 2 that are Southern Valley near Gonzales, and then 1 in Salinas proper. And so I have the PowerPoint. It's also online, and so I can just pass this down because there's some good pictures. And basically, the idea behind this project, it would be remote management. And doing a pilot to determine the effectiveness of the treatment itself, but also the cost effectiveness of remote management. So that was really exciting. And then while I was down there, I spent some time with former Undersecretary of CDFA, Sandy Schuber. She is doing adjunct, teaching adjunct at Cal Poly, and so I was a guest lecturer in her ag law class, and so that was fun. I used to spend some time teaching at Cal State Stanislaus, so it was a good opportunity to get back in the classroom. And students were great. Their questions were, I was just really surprised. They really seem interested. Either she's doing a good job, I'm sure she's doing a good job, but they just seem to have a lot of interest in what we're working on at the Water Board. And Jean-Pierre Wolf was also a speaker, so they were well prepared before I even got there. And I passed out the flyer about the new internship program, and I do expect that we're going to get a couple of people from that class that'll be applying.
That's great. Next.
Yeah, there's certainly an energy that younger students bring to a lot of this, and I'm often intimidated by it. So I went to the Aspen Institute. The Aspen Institute held a discussion in Salt Lake City, Utah, and so I went there on the 28th. It was about water data.
Oh,
and
great.
So
they're really continuing on that. That's great.
they really are, yeah. So we talked about the Internet of Water, which is this sort of project to connect data hubs throughout the West, particularly around water data. And there's the OpenET project, Open Evapotranspiration Rate project, that our folks in the Delta, our Delta Water Master has spoken about. And this is this alternative way of perhaps calculating consumption and use without having to measure then actual diversions. And so it was so it was an update on several of the projects that they were kind of bird dogging, the OpenET, Internet of Water, and then also something known as WADE. It's with the Western States Water Council, and they're trying to compile as much water data from Western states as possible, including water rights, which, the interoperability of one water rights system with another isn't really there, so you can't really do the cross comparisons, but they're really trying to, continue to create these repositories of information so as to make it cheaper and easier to do a lot of the analysis that, goes into water management in our watersheds, and to start, again, creating these common decision support tools, or at least support tools that are based off of common data and information. So, a big challenge in the Colorado River Basin, obviously, is allocation and quantification of use, and there's a lot of complexity there. But so anyway, it was a fantastic opportunity and discussion, and I was fortunate to have been invited there. And Greg Gearhart was participating as well, and Cami Argavechi from DWR was attending. So it was a good, strong California presence in the discussion, and more than anything, really great to hear about all the great, fantastic work that's being done in other states around this to kind of help inform the really mature discussions we're having in this state. And then also went down that week to meet with just staff in Region 9 to sit down and talk, kind of anticipation of our field hearing as well that we'll be having out there, but to talk about some of the common issues that they face with the other border region that we have, the Colorado River Basin Regional Water Quality Control Board. And my sort of message is wanting to see more of a if you will, a coordinated, approach to both of those regions, given the issues being so similar with the Tijuana River Valley and then also the New River on the Colorado River side. And
Well, plus on the Mexican side, it's so much driven by the federal, so there's one.
the IBWC and so yes, it was a good opportunity just to get down there. Previously, it was actually supposed to have been coupled with a trip down to meet with the IBWC in Mexicali, but because of the shutdown, that trip ended up getting canceled, but I kept my trip to go see staff on the San Diego side at least. And then that's about it, I think. But otherwise, to just also flag again, that our internship program is now kind of official out there. There's a deadline of February 8th in 3 days, actually. So I think, they'll be open until filled as well. So, but hopefully there's a strong showing. So maybe that's an update we can get from staff at some point, just how the response has been. And maybe when that first cohort is actually kind of coalesced, maybe that'll be a good point to kind of bring them through. Yeah. So, yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you for your work on that.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
No update for me this time.
I obviously the first week after the last board meeting, I did nothing because I was so sick, but I made up for it a bit this past week. As I was telling Board Member McGuire, I went down to LA for the annual Verde Exchange conference, which is energy climate. There's a water track that I've helped with over the years. I got off easy. I didn't have to speak on 2 panels and moderate another one. I just got to moderate a panel, so it was merciful. But it's a gathering of investors, technology promoters, the civic infrastructure of LA, more or less. So it tends to be LA focused, but not exclusively, with a heavy international presence, largely from Japan and Canada, Israel, occasionally Australia. It sort of depends. The fireworks in the plenaries were about the state versus national, cars, climate, but also there was a panel on the future of the CPUC that I missed because I had to be in something else. And so when they post everything online, I'll try and get you all a link, but I'm told it's worth popcorn. That's all I'm saying about it. It should be interesting. But it was really good. And the second day I went, normally I end up having to come back here because there's always so much going on, but I was invited to and went to a charrette, a morning charrette, then a lunch, and then an afternoon charrette. That was just awesome. If you think about, well, someone like me who's been around for 35 years working on this stuff in LA, where you had people from Metropolitan, the regional board, LA County Sanitation, City Sanitation, LA DWP, County Public Works, with everybody talking in the morning about recycled water and how to up the game in the LA area, not just getting DWP, for example, and City Sanitation to work together, but having Metropolitan, County San, County Public Works, City, it's everybody sort of looking at it together to figure out how you might be able to maximize the system, including thinking about stormwater capture and using the distributed infrastructure that's going to be developed for that under the Prop W $500 million that passed to build on the $500 million the city's already spent, to figure out where's the best place to take stormwater and even hold it in equalization basins and be able to decide whether it's going to go down to Hyperion to be recycled, which is kind of expensive treatment for stormwater, but sometimes whatever, you can settle it out, for more recycled water, or whether it's going to be metered out to go recharge a groundwater basin. So a whole discussion about equalization basins and holding tanks and telemetry and being able to go across these agencies and figure, I was blown away because, I mean, again, it's when you're older, it's all relative, but it was really exciting. I mean, not just the Prop W work, which is, going to help them comply with our permit, plus do a lot of things, but also the fact that they were even talking about how you might integrate. And that's not going to happen tomorrow, but a lot of great leadership from Supervisor Sheila Kuehl's office in really starting the ball rolling. Fran and I went down to help with this first ever meeting of this strange collection of people in 2015, I think, and to come to this and see it, it just, you could sort of see the future and all the stuff we keep talking about actually starting to maybe be real. So that, I'm sorry, a long discussion, but it was really inspiring and reminded me that it's very easy to sit at our desks because there's so much paper and so many meetings, but getting out in the field makes all the difference in the world, and it's why we exist as this 5-member board in part. I also went to a couple of other things. I'll just mention a couple. One was the annual California Water Law Conference that's put together by the 5 and now 6 Bay Area law schools, and they rotate around locations. This year, the whole topic was on SGMA. So, and the students organized the panels, and so it was very intensive. Our staff very well represented. I think we probably had a water board lawyer or staffer on every panel, which I didn't know till I got there, and I thought was fantastic, and they did a great job, and with high kudos. It ends up being an interesting conference because it's a mix of students from the law schools and practicing water lawyers, you know, sort of the who's who of water lawyers across the spectrum. So it was very good. Ron Roby was there, a whole host of people were there, and the lunchtime keynote was actually an interviews, you know, sort of a talk show. It was kind of a talk show, actually, with Fran Pavley and me talking about the origin of SGMA and how it's rolling out and the future of SGMA that Rick Frank put together and then moderated. And it was a lot of fun. And then finally, and Fran Pavley was very complimentary of our role throughout the whole SGMA process, both when she was there but afterwards. The other thing I did yesterday, speaking of field trips and trying to do them, is I don't know if any of you have been to the Codiga facility at Stanford, which I went, and Shala Farnaj and Robert Brownwood came with me. It was a new kind of treatment out of Israel. A company was doing one of these, and most of the people there were engineering firms and water agencies and then some academics. And they actually went into detail about a new membrane technology. I won't get into the details, that has the promise of cutting energy, space needs, O&M for nutrient treatment. That you could either do as little package plants that come arriving on like a flatbed, or you can add them to add capacity. I mean, it has all kinds of applications, particularly for small systems. But the reason why we went, in addition to being interesting, is that this Codiga facility that Sebastian Tillmans runs at Stanford is this really interesting thing that Stanford set up, where they have like a little mini wastewater treatment plant, and they sort of sewer mine off the line that's going through Palo Alto, and they've got, you know, all the mini versions of all of the treatment parts, you know, with disinfection at the end if you need it, and et cetera, although it goes back into the sewer line. And then they have these modules where, for whatever amount of time, months or years, someone wants to have their technology tested. This is sort of that valley of death that happens where people have a new technology that looks great, but people can't go to Israel or China or somewhere to look at it. And it's a chance to test it out against the current sort of California standards, and that whole, it's pretty exciting as a way to help water technology evolve. And we don't have quite as much going where we can help water technologies, and we don't have the same funding source or ability. Board Member Dinamo has talked about this a lot in terms of the capacity of the air board and our energy boards, because they have a funding source for doing it. So I bring it up just to recommend that you go on a tour there, and I asked Sebastian, they love giving tours. Anytime you're going to Stanford for something, we could just give a call, and it's just kind of exciting even to hear about what they're doing. And the report, the interim report on this technology, should be up on their website now, and now they're gonna do a further test, because for whatever reason the influent in Palo Alto is more intense than your average wastewater treatment. And I don't know, those
Do the people in Palo Alto know this?
there's something about diet going on there, but it's also, they're very good on efficiency. So like other places, the waste streams are getting more concentrated at all of the wastewater treatment plants. So well, again, I like sewage stuff, so it was really fun. So well, you're around sewer people, they're just trying to solve problems, you know, because you got to deal with a river of human waste coming at you 24 hours a day. You don't have time for cocktail party chatter. You have to just do stuff. So it's just fun energy to be around. So I recommend it.
You know, not to draw us too off topic, but just really quick, that did bring to mind that I've had conversations with Darren Polhamus about this around kind of workforce development, more sort of discussions. But I guess it turns out in the early days of the program that we actually ran a demo plant, a wastewater demo plant, and would to help certify folks and stuff like that. So it's not that far, not that I think we want to be running demo plants anytime soon, but those sort of, you know, there was a function that the board sort of had, not necessarily testing, I think, technology, but certainly in
also
running systems like that for the benefit of,
just like the airport does with, it would be great if we get back to that. Robert also pointed out that, that in the code, the drinking water program isn't able to do a whole bunch of technology testing and evaluation, and it's just never been funded or staffed. So we actually have the enabling legislation for it, but we haven't gotten the folks to do it, although we do have a good team that looks at certifying these things. When folks actually come in with a project, we have to permit it. So Eugene looks at them and the like, but we actually have the structure to be able to do more in drinking water. Cool. All right. Well, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
If I might have 30 seconds of your time, I just wanted to let...
You can have as much as you want.
I just wanted to let you know, I know that Board Member Escoval is aware, but we now have a contract in place for all regional board meetings to be webcast.
Oh, yes, thank you.
And I think that the Region 3 board meeting, I think that might have been the first one. So I had been hoping that it would be in place and could be used by January 1st, but we did get a board meeting in on a regional board meeting in January. So those are all being kindly scheduled by Ms. Tyler. I'm sure it's going to be a mess as they get up and running and figure out the logistics of their meetings and what equipment they need. And so I imagine there'll be a few bumps in the road at the beginning here, but they'll be, just like our meetings here, they'll be webcast in real time and then archived shortly thereafter. And so if there's any discussion that comes up at a regional board meeting that that one or the other of you want to see, you'll be able to, as well as members of the public, go in and take a look at those directly.
Yeah, they really appreciated that at Region 3, especially in these large regions where it's difficult to get around. Well, and I know from liaison in Region 6,
oh my gosh,
it's impossible to get around during certain times of year. So they really appreciated that, and I wanted to deliver that message as well.
Yeah, thank you for making sure. In fact, I can't believe I forgot that. But yeah,
I know, I feel like we should be drinking champagne, but there's probably some rule against it.
Thank you for staff, really, and making it a priority and getting it done. And I think it's just it has tremendous benefit all around that we'll be having that now.
No, I'm thrilled. Thank you, everybody who made that happen. With that, we are going to recess into closed session on the second matter on the agenda. What would you guys like? Would you like a 10-minute break to get coffee or something, or do you want to just go straight there, or what's the?
Fine going in. Either way.
All right, why don't we move in there and just assume, because it'll take some time for staff to get, let's do 10 minutes, and you can check your email, and then staff has a chance to get there.